Hello everyone and welcome to today's Sutta class. We will start as usual with the Namo Tassa. Feel free to join if you like. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, hello everyone and welcome to the Sutta class. After 2 weeks of a somewhat unplanned break, we are back and I'm back on Tuesdays and we can have another Sutta discussion today. And so for today, I have picked the Bhūmija Sutta. This is a sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, number 126. And this is a sutta where somebody talks to the Venerable Bhumija, and that person thinks that when you live a monastic life or a spiritual life, a life of renunciation, then it's kind of useless, it's wasted, because you cannot make any progress, you cannot reach any kind of fruit. So it's kind of useless to live this kind of life. And then the Venerable Bhumija gives him an explanation. And after that, he goes to the Buddha and he checks with the Buddha, and the Buddha gives an even longer explanation. So that is what we are going to do today. I have put a link in the live chat to Bhante Suchato's translation, and I will be reading from Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. So feel free to read along if you like. So the sutta begins. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha, in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Then, when it was morning, the Venerable Bhumija dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, went to the house of Prince Jayasena, and sat down on a seat made ready. So here we have the two main protagonists of this sutta, apart from the Buddha, of course. So there's the Venerable Bhumija and there is Prince Jayasena. The Venerable Bhumija is not that well known in the suttas. He doesn't appear very often. So this is a pretty rare occasion where we get to see him or to learn a little bit about his personality. And then there's Prince Jayasena. And Prince Jayasena, according to the commentary, was a son of King Bimbisara of Magadha. And of course, here we are in Rajagaha, in the capital of Magadha. So probably this Prince Jayasena was a really very, very influential person in this town. And according to the commentary, also, the Venerable Bhumija was his uncle. So the two of them are related. And Prince Jayasena also appears in another sutta. He appears in the sutta that is just directly prior to this one, Majjhima Nikaya number 125. And in 125, he seems to be interested in spiritual questions. So he goes and visits another monk and he asks him a question about jhana, but he doesn't really understand the explanation and he leaves quite disappointed, and he comes to the conclusion that it's not really possible to attain jhana. So we see that even in other suttas, Prince Jayasena asks monastic questions. He seems to be quite interested or somewhat interested in spiritual questions, but he has a difficult time really understanding what it's all about. So he is not one of those people who meet a monastic and get a teaching and then immediately attain stream entry or something like that. He is one of the people who have a difficult time grasping what it's all about. And here again, we have him having another conversation with another monastic, in this case, the Venerable Bhumija. And so we see that the Venerable Bhumija sits down on a seat that is already made ready. So it seems that Prince Jayasena's house was generally open to spiritual practitioners. Probably many different kinds of spiritual seekers from different traditions went to his house on alms round. So it's quite likely that he had these kind of conversations quite regularly with practitioners of different kinds of spiritual movements. And so now the Venerable Bhumija has come to his house on his arms round. And then Prince Jayasena went to the Venerable Bhumija and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and said to the Venerable Bhumija, Master Bhumija, there are some recluses and Brahmins who make such assertions and hold such views as this. If one makes an aspiration and one leads the holy life, one is unable to procure any fruit. If one makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life, one is still unable to procure any fruit. If one both makes an aspiration and makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life, one is still unable to procure any fruit. And if one neither makes an aspiration nor makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life, one is still unable to procure any fruit. What does the Venerable Bhumija's teacher say here? What does he declare? So here we have Prince Jayasena, and he starts the conversation by quoting the teachings that he has heard from other teachers. So as I mentioned, it seems that he was quite interested in spiritual matters, and he had regular conversations with other spiritual practitioners. And so the teaching that he got from some other people was that it's entirely useless to lead a spiritual life because one is unable to procure any fruit. So there is no fruit at the end of the spiritual life. There is no goal to develop towards. So the spiritual quest or spiritual seeking or trying to have a spiritual development is futile from the beginning because there is no fruit to be gained. And he gives various alternatives about making aspirations. So this is called a Tetralemma. And traditionally in Western thought, we always think in opposites. Something can be either A or B. In ancient India, they didn't just have two alternatives of things. There wasn't just A or B. Something could also be A and B at the same time, or it could be neither A nor B. So there were four possibilities of how things could work out. So if you wanted to have like a full range of all possibilities, you would always talk about four possibilities, not just about two, as we traditionally do in Western countries. And so in this case, Prince Jayasena talks about making an aspiration and then going forth and leading the holy life. So of course, when you make an aspiration, that could be any kind of spiritual aspiration. For example, traditionally in Buddhism, when you go forth, maybe you have the wish or the aspiration to attain Nibbana or to overcome suffering, or maybe people were spiritual seekers for all kinds of reasons. So maybe you would want to know what life is all about, what is the meaning of life, or a question like, who am I? Why am I here? All these kinds of spiritual questions, which would lead somebody to let go of a normal material lifestyle and start a spiritual journey and start to seek answers to those questions. So all these could be these kind of motivations to lead a spiritual life. And so usually you have some kind of aspiration when you go forth. So this is one possibility. The first possibility that Prince Jayasena talks about here, you make an aspiration and then you go forth. And the teaching that he has heard is that still, even though you have that aspiration, you will not get any fruit. So the spiritual life is useless. And then the other possibility is not to make an aspiration. So basically, you just go forth and you see where the path takes you. So those kind of easygoing personalities, not quite sure what they're doing, but we'll just give it a try and see what happens. And then you could both make an aspiration and make no aspiration, or you could make neither an aspiration nor no aspiration, just to cover all bases, like with whatever kind of motivation you go into the spiritual life. In all cases, Prince Jayasena claims that those teachers have taught him that it will not lead to any kind of fruit. And now, so obviously that makes a spiritual life entirely useless, and it's entirely stupid to live that kind of life. And now Prince Jayasena is meeting his uncle, the Venerable Bhumija. So obviously he's interested why his family member is leading a holy life if there's no point to doing that. And so he asks, what does your teacher say? what does he declare? And the Venerable Bhumija answers, I have not heard and learned that from the Blessed One's own lips, Prince. But it is possible that the Blessed One might say this. If one makes an aspiration and one leads the holy life unwisely, one is unable to procure any fruit. If one makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life unwisely, one is still unable to procure any fruit. If one both makes an aspiration and makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life unwisely, one is still unable to procure any fruit. If one neither makes an aspiration nor makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life unwisely, one is still unable to procure any fruit. However, if one makes an aspiration and one leads the holy life wisely, one is able to procure fruit. If one makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life wisely, one is still able to procure fruit. If one both makes an aspiration and makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life wisely, one is still able to procure fruit. If one neither makes an aspiration nor makes no aspiration and one leads the holy life wisely, one is still able to procure fruit. I have not heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips, Prince. But it is possible that the Blessed One would answer as I have stated. So here we have the Venerable Bhumija's answer, and he makes it clear that it's not about whether you make an aspiration or you make no aspiration, or you both make an aspiration and don't make an aspiration. The question is whether you have wisdom, whether you lead your holy life in line with wisdom. If you live it in line with wisdom, then obviously you're going to get a fruit. Obviously, you're going to get a result. Obviously, you're going to make progress. You're going to develop on the path, and your holy life has a meaning in this case. However, if you live it unwisely, then obviously you're not going to make progress. You're not going to get to any kind of goal. You're not going to have any kind of positive development. And obviously then there is no fruit and no purpose to your holy life. So it's not about making an aspiration. It's not about making a wish. It's not about having some deep fundamental question that you want to have answered, like what is the meaning of life, or who am I, or even I want to really want to get to Nibbana or something. It's not about that. It's whether you live your entire life, like if you practice the path in line with wisdom. So it's really about the practice. It's not about the aspiration, the wish, the question that you start the path with. It's how you live that life. It's whether you can implement wisdom in the actions that you do on that path. And if you have that wisdom, if you live that life wisely, then you're going to get the fruit. So, and the Venerable Bhumija also makes it very clear. He says here, I have not heard this from the Blessed One personally, but I think that the Blessed One would answer in this way. So the Venerable Bhumija is very careful not to misrepresent the Buddha, even though he is quite like certain that the Buddha would probably answer in this way. Still, he doesn't claim that he has heard it from the Buddha, and he says, this is my own understanding of how the Buddha usually speaks. But take it with a grain of salt. I'm kind of certain, but I'm not 100% absolutely certain. So we can see also here how people at that time were really very careful not to misrepresent the Buddha, because obviously if you misrepresent the Buddha and if you teach Dhamma in a way that is not really 100% correct, that will be misleading people. People will think that they have heard the proper Dhamma. People might even start to practice in line with whatever they have heard. And if that was wrong, then you're totally leading them astray. They might not make the progress that they could have made otherwise. So you're creating a lot of obstacles for other people. You could make very bad karma. You could even obstruct them from attaining Nibbana. You could obstruct them from making progress on the path. So people who might have the possibility of developing cannot develop because of your wrong teaching. And also, if people later find out that you have taught them a wrong thing, then maybe they lose faith in the Buddha or they lose faith in the Sangha. So obviously that would create a lot of bad karma. So people at that time were really very scrupulous in the way that they taught the Dhamma and that they represented the teaching of the Buddha. And it's very different from what we see nowadays in modern times, where a lot of people claim all sorts of wild things on the internet or in books or in Dhamma talks, and everybody says this is what the Buddha taught, or this is a technique, a meditation technique that goes back to the Buddha or something like that. And when you ask them, or when you actually check with the suttas, or you ask them for their sources, they can't really properly answer. And then it seems that it was just their own teaching, and they thought that maybe this is in line with Buddhism, and they thought maybe this is, or this should be what the Buddha taught, because this is how they experience their meditation, that's how they interpret their meditation experiences, or whatever. But actually, it's totally against the Buddhist teaching. So nowadays we are not that scrupulous anymore, and we see what it has led to. We see how there's a wide range of teachings out there that are claiming to be Buddhism but aren't actually Buddhism. But back in the day, in the Buddha's time, people were really, really very careful, because they saw all the negative consequences that can happen if you just randomly claim that random stuff was in line with the Dhamma. So he is very careful to explain to Prince Jayasena that he is not 100% certain about this answer. But still, Prince Jayasena answers, if Master Bhumija's teacher speaks thus, if he declares thus, then it certainly seems that the Venerable Bhumija's teacher stands ahead of all the ordinary recluses and Brahmins. Then Prince Jayasena served the Venerable Bhumija from his own dish of milk rice. So it seems that Prince Jayasena was quite happy with this answer, and he understood that it's not about aspirations. He understood that it is about developing wisdom and implementing wisdom in one's daily practice. And he was so happy about it that he shared his own food with the Venerable Bhumija. So we remember Venerable Bhumija was on alms round. He was trying to collect food. And of course, back in the day, especially in a big house such as Prince Jayasena's, where they have a lot of workers and servants and so on, they would usually have a lot of different kinds of food. So one kind of food for the prince and his family, and another sort of lower grade of food for workers and servants and so on. And depending on how much esteem they have for their recluses and wanderers that come to their house on alms round, they would give them different kinds of food. So the ones that they have a lot of respect for, they would give better kinds of food, and other ones they would give some kind of the lower grade of food. And of course here, what this sentence wants to tell us is that Prince Jayasena was really very inspired, and he gave him his own personal food. So, and then when the Venerable Bhumija had returned from his alms round after his meal, he went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and told the Blessed One what had occurred, adding, Venerable Sir, I hope that when I was asked such a question and answered thus, I said what has been said by the Blessed One and did not misrepresent him with what is contrary to fact. I hope I explained in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from my assertion. So the Venerable Bhumija has finished his alms round, but still he thinks about what he just did. And so he thinks, oh, I'm not really 100% certain, so I better go and check with the Buddha to see if I've actually explained this properly. Because obviously if it was wrong, then he should go back and correct it. So he goes to the Buddha and explains the whole thing and says, I hope that I did not misrepresent the Buddha, and I hope that nobody can censure me for what I said, like legitimately censure me for what I said. So legitimately is very important here, because people criticize you for all kinds of things, even if you're the most perfect person, if you've done the most wholesome act. People can always find reasons for criticizing. Even the Buddha was criticized regularly. But those kind of criticisms aren't really legitimate criticism. It's just people having a lot of defilements in their mind. But of course, wise people who are arahants, who don't have defilements in their mind, can also sometimes criticize other people if they're doing unwholesome stuff. So in that case, that would be a legitimate criticism. So this is the kind of criticism, obviously, that the Venerable Bhumija is worried about, the criticism by wise people. And so he hopes that there is no legitimate reason for criticism. And the Buddha says, surely, Bhumija, when you were asked such a question and answered thus, you said what has been said by me and did not misrepresent me with what is contrary to fact. You explained in accordance with the Dhamma in such a way that nothing which provides a ground for censure can be legitimately deduced from your assertion. So the Buddha is quite happy with the explanation that the Venerable Bhumija gave here. And he sort of endorses the explanation that the Venerable Bhumija has given to the prince. And now he explains it in a little bit more detail, just to flesh out the teaching a little bit more, so that Bhumija is kind of a little bit more at ease about what he said, and so that next time he can give a bit more in-depth Dhamma talk about this issue. And so the Buddha uses this as an opportunity to teach Bhumija also in a little bit more detail about this issue. And so the Buddha continues to say, whatever recluses and Brahmins have wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration, if they make an aspiration and they lead the holy life, they are unable to procure any fruit. If they make no aspiration, or if they both make an aspiration and make no aspiration, or if they neither make an aspiration nor make no aspiration and they lead the holy life, they are still unable to procure any fruit. Why is that? Because that wrong path is not a proper method for procuring fruit. So now the Buddha explains what it means to lead a holy life unwisely. So if you lead a holy life unwisely, then that means that you have wrong view, wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. So obviously this is are the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, but in the wrong way. So you don't lead the Eightfold Path, you lead the opposite of the Eightfold Path. So all the path factors are the wrong factors. In that case, obviously you have no wisdom. Obviously, your path isn't going to develop because it's not the Noble Eightfold Path, so you can't make progress in the Dhamma, you can't make progress to overcome suffering and to reach Nibbana. And so if you have these wrong path factors, then whether you have the wish to develop or you don't have a wish to develop, or you have made some kind of aspiration for your spiritual life, where you want to go, the questions that you want to have answered, whether you do that or you don't do that, whether you have an aspiration or you don't have an aspiration, either way, you're not going to make any progress because the path factors are missing. And so then the Buddha adds a few similes. And the Buddha says, suppose a man needing oil, seeking oil, wandering in search of oil, were to heap gravel in a tub, sprinkle it all over with water and press it. Then if he made an aspiration and acted thus, he would be unable to procure any oil. If he made no aspiration, or both made an aspiration and made no aspiration, or neither made one nor didn't make one, and he acted thus, he would still be unable to procure any oil. Why is that? Because that way of acting is not a proper method for procuring oil. And so too, whatever recluses have the wrong path factors, they are still unable to procure any fruit. Why is that? Because that wrong path is not a proper method for procuring fruit. So here is a person looking for oil, trying to make oil, but instead of using a plant that actually has oil in it, where you can extract oil, they're using gravel. And obviously, you cannot extract any oil from gravel. So this is a person, outwardly, they almost got it right. Like they're putting it in a tub, they're pressing it, they're doing all the actions. It almost looks like they should be getting oil, but because they didn't use a plant with oil, they use gravel. Obviously, there isn't going to nothing is going to come out. There isn't going to be any oil. So it can, so in the same way, if you lead a holy life, but you don't have the Eightfold Path, it can almost look like the real deal. Like if you don't really know what you're looking for, it can really seem like almost the right teaching. And it can seem very impressive. It can seem like they know what they're doing. It can seem like they're having their act together. But if you look closely, then you see there's something twisted, there's something wrong there. And for that reason, their path doesn't really develop. And in the same way that if you want oil and you act in this way, whether you wish for oil, whether you have that aspiration to make oil, or you don't wish for it, or you both wish and don't wish, there's just not going to be any oil, because the method that you're using is the wrong method. So whether you wish for it or you don't, it's not going to make any difference. And then the Buddha has another simile. Suppose a man needing milk, seeking milk, wandering in search of milk, were to pull a recently calved cow by her horn. Then if he made an aspiration or no aspiration and so on, and acted thus, he would still be unable to procure any milk. Why is that? Because that way of acting is not a proper method for procuring milk. So again, now there's a person who needs milk, and there is a cow that has recently had a baby calf, so a cow that is actually producing milk. So it would be so easy to get milk from that, but the person is kind of a little bit delusional, and instead of getting the milk, they're pulling at the horn, and obviously there's no milk coming out from a horn. And so that person, even though they're almost there, they have got something wrong, and so they're not going to get any milk. Whether they wish for milk, they make an aspiration for milk, or they make no aspiration, because the actual act, the actual physical activity isn't in line with reality, they are not going to get any milk. And then there is another simile. Suppose a man needing butter, seeking butter, wandering in search of butter, were to pour water into a churn and churn it with a churning stick. Then if he made an aspiration or no aspiration and so on, he would still be unable to procure any butter. Why is that? Because that way of acting is not a proper method for procuring butter. So in the same way here, same kind of simile, person wants to make butter, but instead of using a milk-based substance, they are using water. So obviously you're not ever going to get butter from water. So again, they've almost got it right. They're doing all the actions that would technically be necessary. They put it into a churn, they churn it and so on. But still, it's not going to work. Whether they make an aspiration or make no aspiration, it isn't going to work. And then one final simile is, suppose a man needing fire, seeking fire, wandering in search of fire, would take an upper fire stick and rub a wet, sappy piece of wood with it. Then if he made an aspiration, no aspiration, and so on, and acted thus, he would still be unable to procure any fire. Why is that? Because that way of acting is not a proper method for procuring fire. So too, whatever recluses and Brahmins have wrong view, and the other path factors up to wrong samadhi, they are still unable to procure any fruit. Why is that? Because that wrong path is not a proper method for procuring fruit. So again, here is a person that wants to make fire, and they already have an upper fire stick, and they know that they have to rub it against a piece of wood, and then there will be fire. So they've, again, almost got it right. From the outside, it might look like they know what they're doing, but they use a wet, sappy piece of wood. So obviously, because the wood is wet, it's not ever going to ignite, and there's not ever going to be any fire. And in the same way, if you follow a wrong Eightfold Path, then it almost looks like the real deal, but it's not quite there. And so obviously, you're not going to get the results that you could get if you had the right Eightfold Path. But there's obviously also the contrary, people who are practicing the proper Eightfold Path. And so the Buddha continues to say, whatever recluses and Brahmins have right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness, and right concentration or samadhi. If they make an aspiration and they lead a holy life, they are able to procure fruit. If they make no aspiration and they lead the holy life, they are still able to procure fruit. If they both make an aspiration and make no aspiration and they lead the holy life, they are still able to procure fruit. And if they neither make an aspiration nor make no aspiration and they lead the holy life, they are still able to procure fruit. Why is that? Because that right path is a proper method for procuring fruit. So here we have practitioners, renunciants who practice the proper Noble Eightfold Path. And then again, whether they make a wish or they don't make a wish, they will still attain the fruits of the path. So whether they wish to attain Nibbana, whether they wish to overcome suffering or they don't, still they will make progress on the path. And now, maybe this is a little bit intriguing to us that you don't need to have this wish for Nibbana in order to make progress. Maybe this is a little bit unusual because we think obviously this is what gives us the motivation to practice. If we see that there's a lot of suffering and we want to overcome that suffering, this is what motivates us to practice. Obviously, if you have this aspiration, it's not that this is going to be an obstacle. It's not that this is going to be a problem. The Buddha just says, if you have that or if you don't have that, either way, if you actually put the Eightfold Path into practice, then this will propel you forward on the path. And of course, in the Noble Eightfold Path, we also have factors like right intention. So intention is important. However, like right intention, these are, it's not necessarily the aspiration to reach Nibbana. Right intention is usually defined as trying to practice harmlessness, not harming other beings, the intention of renunciation, so not running after sense pleasures, and the intention of non-cruelty, so again, not harming other beings, not having anger, not having hatred, and so on. So these kind of intentions are very important. This is a part of the path. But whether you have some of these like spiritual questions, like who am I, what is the meaning of life, I want to attain Nibbana and stuff like this, these more kind of abstract things, these aren't really necessary on the path. Whether you have this or you don't have this, you still can make progress on the path. And then, of course, we also have things like right effort here. Right effort, you could also think, well, this kind of intention might be similar to right effort. This kind of aspiration might be similar to right effort because, again, this gives us the motivation to develop wholesome states. And of course, you can, if you have that kind of aspiration, you can use that skillfully to develop right effort. Right effort, of course, is usually defined as developing wholesome states and abandoning unwholesome states. So if you have an aspiration like this, that can help you with right effort, but it's not actually necessary. You can develop right effort in all kinds of ways. So not having such an aspiration isn't really an obstacle to practicing on the path. So whether you have that aspiration or you don't have the aspiration, what is really important is that you have the 8 path factors. That is where wisdom comes in. That is what the Venerable Bhumija previously called practicing wisely. And if you develop those 8 path factors, basically, we have the law of cause and effect. The path factors are the cause, and the effect is that there's going to be a fruit because you're going to have a wholesome development. You're going to make good karma. You're going to abandon all the defilements in the mind because you're developing right effort and right mindfulness and right samadhi. You're going to purify your mental behavior, your verbal behavior, your bodily behavior, because you have right action, right speech, right intention, and so on. And everything is based in right view, the understanding of the Dhamma, the first path factor. So obviously all that is coming together and propelling you forward on the path. And so the Buddha says, this is the proper method for procuring fruit. And then the Buddha again gives us the similes. And the Buddha says, suppose a man needing oil, seeking oil, wandering in search of oil, were to heap sesamum flour into a tub, sprinkle it all over with water and press it. Then if he made an aspiration and acted thus, he would be able to procure oil, or no aspiration, or both, or neither. He would still be able to procure oil. Why is that? Because that way of acting is a proper method for procuring oil. So here we have a man who still needs oil, but this time that person has figured it out how to do it. They're not using gravel, they're actually using sesame flour. And of course, if you press sesame flour, you can get oil, sesame oil. So whether you wish for sesame oil or you don't wish for sesame oil, if you press the flour, you're going to get oil because the method is the right method. And in the same way, if you practice the Eightfold Path, you're going to get a fruit because that is the right method for attaining spiritual fruits. And then there is the next simile. Suppose a man needing milk, seeking milk, wandering in search of milk, were to pull a recently calved cow by her udder. Then if he made an aspiration or no aspiration or both or neither, and he acted thus, he would still be able to procure milk. Why is that? Because that way of acting is a proper method for procuring milk. So it's pretty self-explanatory. A person needs milk, and this time they're not pulling the horn, they are pulling the udder, and now they are getting milk. So it looks, again, very similar to what the person previously did. So in the same way, it's very easy to mistake a wrong spiritual life for a right spiritual life, because from the outside, they can look very similar. But there is a very, very substantial fundamental difference. For that reason, one leads to the result and the other one doesn't lead to the result. And the difference is not whether you make an aspiration or you don't make an aspiration. The difference is whether you act with wisdom, whether you act in line with the Eightfold Path, or whether you don't. And then there is another simile. Suppose a man needing butter, seeking butter, wandering in search of butter, were to pour curd into a churn and churn it with a churning stick. And then whatever kind of aspiration or no aspiration he makes, if he acted thus, he would still be able to procure butter. Why is that? Because that way of acting is a proper method for procuring butter. And suppose a man needing fire, seeking fire, wandering in search of fire, were to take an upper fire stick and rub a dry, sapless piece of wood with it. Then whatever aspiration or no aspiration he makes, if he acts thus, he would still be able to procure fire. Why is that? Because that way of acting is a proper method for procuring fire. So to whatever recluses and Brahmins have right view up all the way to right samadhi, they are still able to procure fruit. Why is that? Because that right path is a proper method for procuring fruit. So here we have two more similes. This time the person who needs butter uses curd instead of water. So obviously if you churn curd, naturally you'll get butter. It's just a natural process. It's the law of cause and effect. If you put the right cause there, the effect will come. If you put curd into a churn, you churn it, butter will happen. Whether you aspire for it or you don't aspire for it, if you do the action, it will just naturally happen, cause and effect. Same way with the fire. If you have an upper fire stick and a sapless dry piece of wood, you rub them together. Naturally, there's going to be a fire, again, cause and effect. No need to have an aspiration for the fire. You just do the action and the fire will come. And in the same way with the Eightfold Path, you just live your life in line with the Eightfold Path, make a full commitment, practice all the 8 path factors to the full extent, and naturally you will come to the fruit, to the noble fruits, to stream entry, or even to arahantship. And then the Buddha finishes by saying, Bhūmija, if these 4 similes had occurred to you with reference to Prince Jayasena, he would have spontaneously acquired confidence in you, and being confident, he would have shown his confidence to you. Venerable Sir, how could these 4 similes have occurred to me with reference to Prince Jayasena, as they occur to the Blessed One, since they are spontaneous and have never been heard before? This is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Bhūmija was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So the Buddha says, well, if you had known about these 4 similes, Bhūmija, and if you had taught them to Prince Jayasena, he would have benefited even more. He would have understood even deeper. He would have acquired confidence in the Dhamma, and he would have shown to you that he has acquired this confidence. So the Buddha says, if Bhūmija had known about the similes, which obviously he didn't, and he could have taught Jayasena in a little bit more detail, Jayasena would have acquired confidence. That means maybe he would even have become a faith follower, or he would even have made a breakthrough to a stream entry. So he would have been settled in the Dhamma. That would, of course, have been a major accomplishment for him. As I mentioned in the beginning, Prince Jayasena is a spiritual seeker. He has these questions. He likes to talk with people, but he doesn't really understand the teaching. So he has a very hard time grasping all these concepts, all these teachings. It's very difficult for his mind to actually penetrate and understand what all these recluses and Brahmins are teaching him. And as I mentioned before, there's another sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 125, where he talks with another monk and also doesn't understand what's going on. So obviously his mind doesn't really incline to the Dhamma that easily, but the Buddha says if you had taught him this might have helped him to make that breakthrough and to become settled in the Dhamma. So that would have been a major benefit for Jayasena. But Bhūmija, the Venerable Bhūmija says, well, how could I have known this since you just came up with those similes at the time when I was teaching him? Obviously, nobody had ever heard these similes before. So unfortunately for Jayasena, he was not able to get this teaching here. So this is the Bhūmija Sutta. I think it's a really very lovely sutta, very inspiring sutta. I think the similes are very beautiful. And the way the Buddha says, well, it's actually so easy to practice the path. You don't have to, make all these dramatic aspirations and dramatic vows and go through whatever, all kinds of dramatic rituals. You just practice the Eightfold Path, cause and effect. You put the teaching into practice, and then the fruit will come. So with the proper method, you get the proper fruit. So I think it's a very, very beautiful sutta. So at this point, we are going to finish the sutta class for today. If you have any questions or comments, then please leave them in the live chat, and I will see if I can answer them. So I see a lot of people checking in from all over the world. It's really nice. Somebody checked in from Poland, another person from India, many different places. Really, really good to see you all. So Buddha Ruchi has a question, and they say, practice is primary, but is not a wish, intention important to start us off or to keep us going? So I think I talked about this a little bit, but I think you posted your question before I talked about it. So certainly wish or intention or motivation can be very helpful on the path, because that motivation kind of gets us started and keeps us going. Like if we have the wish to overcome suffering, for example, then we won't give up easily. We won't lose motivation and start doing other stuff with our life. So that can be helpful, but it's not actually necessary. As the Buddha said, if you have an aspiration and you lead the holy life wisely, that's fine. You're going to make progress. But even if you don't have that and you lead the holy life wisely in line with the Eightfold Path, you're still going to make progress. So it can be helpful, but it's not absolutely necessary. And we have Ayya Shakya Dhammadina here. Very good to see you, Venerable. So nice to see that you're joining in. I'm very happy that you're here. I think it's not really a question, but she says, Sadhu Anumodana for continuous Dhamma teaching through the understanding of different Sangha members. I always try to listen live, but most of the time I fail and listen to it later. Appreciate your work, Sadhu and Amorgana. So good to see you, and I'm very happy that this is helpful for you, and I agree it's really, really nice to listen to other people's Dhamma teachings, even if it is a sutta that we've heard many times. If another person talks about it, we often notice like different points that other people haven't talked about, and we have never really paid attention to, and then one person elaborates on certain points, and then we see that there's another layer to the sutta that we have actually never seen before. So through mutual Dhamma teachings, I think everybody can make a lot of progress. And there are actually suttas where people got enlightened while they were teaching Dhamma to others. So I think teaching Dhamma is always beneficial, even to the teacher. So it's not only beneficial to the students or to the listeners, to the audience, even the one who's giving a talk can also learn something from their own teaching. And somebody has said, if we have doubt in the path, will it work? Well, doubt is one of the hindrances. So hindrances are usually present in the beginning stages of the path. So doubt is what we abandon forever, finally at stream entry. Before that, we can abandon it temporarily if we attain jhana. But before that, doubt can be present in the mind. So it is important to recognize it, to learn how to work with doubt, and to try and understand the Dhamma better so that the doubt gets weakened. Actually, we've just had a series of talks on the 5 hindrances, and we spent an entire session on doubt. So if you have a look on YouTube, there is a video that we made only a few weeks ago. All the methods that we can apply to work with doubt and how to overcome doubt. And then Piyal and Indira say, this sutta is basically saying technique is more important than aspiration. Yeah. So the way we live our life is a lot more important than the aspiration, because that with our bodily, verbal, and mental actions in our day-to-day life, that is how we create karma, that is how we make either positive or negative changes to our life, and that is how we cultivate either positive or negative mind states. And obviously that is eventually what is going to help us, or either help or hinder us on our practice on the path. So, and Claudia says, can we understand from this sutta that the Buddha allows or recommends to find helpful ways, e.g. similes, to help others to understand the Dhamma? So I think the question maybe is, can we kind of make up our own similes even if the Buddha hasn't taught them, or can we find ways to represent the Dhamma even if it's not exactly the words of the Buddha, to help others as long as they're sort of in line with the Dhamma? And I think teachers are doing this like all the time. Even like now when we do a Dhamma talk, basically we're reading the sutta, but still I'm giving explanations. So that is my own words. And the Buddha hasn't exactly said like verbatim the same thing that I am saying. So obviously I hope that I'm not misrepresenting the Buddha. And obviously I hope that what I say is in line with the Buddha and that he would approve if he were to listen to this YouTube live stream. So yeah, I think the Buddha, obviously when he was enlightened and he had the first Arahant students, he told people to spread out and teach the Dhamma everywhere. He wasn't controlling of the teaching. He empowered his disciples to go out and teach the people around them, and he actually sent them out to teach other people, to spread the Dhamma and to help others. So obviously that to some extent requires that we put the Dhamma in our own words. Still, I think it's very good to be humble and to know, if we're not Arahants yet, then to know that we might make mistakes, and to be very conscious of what we're doing, and to always check, is this really in line with the Buddha, and am I not misrepresenting him, and to be cautious and careful, and if in doubt, then rather not teach in that way, and to stay a bit closer to what the Buddha actually taught. But I think there is also room put the Dhamma into your own words. It's a balance. I think it's a fine line, but yeah, it's a balance, and we have to find sort of the middle ground there. And Sud asks, so basically to summarize, whether you believe or not, if we follow Eightfold Path, we will end the suffering. If we follow the Eightfold Path, we will end suffering. Following the Eightfold Path does require a certain amount of confidence or faith in the Buddha's teaching. So having some, I'm not quite sure what you mean with believe, but obviously having some kind of confidence or some kind of faith in the Buddha is helpful. If you, of course, as I mentioned, in the beginning stages, there will still be doubt from time to time. Doubt is a hindrance, and it's natural that it is there until you reach stream entry. But don't let it become so big that it stops your progress. So confidence in the Buddha is certainly helpful. But even if we're not all that confident, at least if we keep on practicing, I think as we see that wholesome states increase and unwholesome states decline, our confidence will naturally grow also. And so we start to trust the Buddha more, and we start to trust the process more. And so eventually we will be able to have confidence and faith in the Buddha and in the practice. So that seems to have been the last question for today. I hope you enjoyed this sutta. And then we will finish for today with 3 sadhus. Feel free to join if you like. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So have a good rest of the day and have a good week. And I will see you all next Tuesday.